You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly you realize you've been watching Family Guy clips for 3 hours straight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the twisted, hilarious, and surprisingly complex world of Family Griffin and his dysfunctional Rhode Island family. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through decades of animated chaos that somehow became one of television's most enduring franchises. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in his apartment, probably eating cereal for dinner, when he creates what would become a cultural phenomenon. But here's the thing most people don't realize about Family Guy. Beneath all the cutaway gags, pop culture references, and Stewie's diabolical schemes lies a surprisingly intricate web of character development, running storylines, and hidden details that span over 2 decades. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because honestly, they're way more complex than people give them credit for. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling dad who works at a brewery. He's actually a fascinating study in arrested development. Throughout the series, we've learned that his childlike behavior stems from a complicated relationship with his father, Francis Griffin, a strict Irish Catholic who never showed Peter affection. This explains so much about why Peter desperately seeks approval, while simultaneously rebelling against authority figures. But here's where it gets interesting. Peter's job at the Pawtucket Brewery isn't just random, it's actually owned by Carter Pewterschmidt, his father-in-law, which creates this whole dynamic where Peter is constantly trying to prove himself to a man who sees him as completely inadequate. The brewery itself has become this recurring location where some of the show's most memorable moments happen, from Peter's various workplace shenanigans to the time he discovered the brewery was basically stealing Budweiser's recipe. Now let's talk about Lois, because she's probably the most underappreciated character in the entire series. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife who puts up with Peter's antics. But dig deeper, and you'll find a former wild child from a wealthy family who gave up everything for love. Lois comes from money, serious money, and she chose to live in a modest house in Quahog with a man her parents despise. Her maiden name, Pewterschmidt, carries weight in their social circle, but she rejected that lifestyle. The fascinating thing about Lois is how the show gradually reveals her past. She was this rebellious rich girl who dated musicians, experimented with different lifestyles, and had a completely different personality before settling down. Sometimes that old Lois emerges, usually when she's pushed too far, and those episodes are absolutely brilliant because they show the complexity beneath her patient exterior. Chris Griffin represents something really interesting in the show's evolution. Initially, he was just the awkward teenage son, but over time, the writers developed him into this surprisingly deep character dealing with typical teenage issues, amplified by his family's dysfunction. His relationship with his father is particularly touching because Peter, despite his flaws, genuinely tries to connect with Chris, even though he has no idea how to be a proper role model. What makes Chris compelling is how he's actually the most emotionally intelligent member of the family. He sees through his parents' problems, understands his sister's struggles, and often serves as the voice of reason, even though he's still figuring out his own identity. His various crushes, friendships, and coming-of-age moments provide some of the show's most genuine emotional beats. Meg Griffin. Oh, poor Meg. She's become this cultural touchstone for teenage awkwardness. But there's something genuinely tragic about her character that goes beyond the surface-level jokes. The constant rejection and abuse she faces from her family would destroy most people, but Meg keeps trying. She keeps hoping for acceptance, keeps pursuing her dreams, keeps believing that maybe tomorrow will be different. The really dark aspect of Meg's story is how the family uses her as their collective punching bag to avoid dealing with their own problems. When Peter and Lois are having marriage troubles, they unite in mocking Meg. When Chris feels insecure, he puts down Meg. It's this twisted family dynamic where she serves as the lightning rod for everyone else's dysfunction. But here's what's brilliant about the show's treatment of Meg. Occasionally, they give her episodes where she fights back or finds genuine happiness, and those moments hit differently because we've watched her suffer for so long. When she stands up to her family or finds someone who appreciates her, it feels earned in a way that's surprisingly powerful for a comedy show. Then there's Stewie, the baby genius with unclear sexual orientation and a British accent that nobody questions. Stewie's character has gone through the most dramatic evolution of anyone in the show. He started as this one-note villain baby trying to kill his mother and take over the world, but gradually became this complex character dealing with identity issues, family dynamics, and his relationship with Brian. The Stewie-Brian friendship is honestly the heart of the entire series. These two characters, despite their obvious differences, have this incredible bond built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Their adventures together, from time travel to road trips, provide some of the show's best storytelling because the writers can explore deeper themes through their relationship. What's fascinating about Stewie is how his intelligence serves as both a blessing and a curse. He can build time machines and understand complex scientific concepts, but he's, quote, still emotionally a child dealing with typical childhood fears and insecurities. His relationship with his mother is particularly complex because while he originally wanted to kill her, he gradually develops this deep love for Lois that he struggles to express. Brian Griffin deserves his own deep dive because he's arguably the show's most controversial character. He's this liberal intellectual dog who writes novels nobody reads, drinks martinis, and constantly preaches about social issues while being fundamentally flawed himself. Brian represents this specific type of person we all know, the friend who talks a good game about being progressive and enlightened, but whose actions don't always match their rhetoric. The genius of Brian's character is how the show gradually reveals his hypocrisy without completely destroying his likability. He's pretentious, he's selfish, he's often wrong about things he claims to understand, but he's also capable of genuine growth and moments of real insight. His romantic relationships throughout the series serve as this ongoing commentary on his character flaws and his struggle to become a better person. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore is how the show handles continuity. On the surface, it seems like a show where anything can happen and nothing really matters. But if you pay attention, there's actually a surprising amount of consistency in character development and running storylines. The writers remembered details from episodes that aired years ago and will call back to them in unexpected ways. Take the ongoing rivalry between Peter and the giant chicken, Ernie. What started as a throwaway gag about expired coupons evolved into this epic saga spanning multiple episodes and featuring increasingly elaborate fight sequences. These battles have become legendary among fans because they represent the show's commitment to taking absurd premises to their logical extreme. The show's relationship with death is particularly fascinating. Characters die and come back, timelines get altered, and reality bends in ways that should break the show's internal logic. But somehow, it all works because the emotional core remains consistent. When major characters like Brian temporarily died, the fan reaction was intense because despite all the show's surreal elements, viewers had formed genuine attachments to these characters. Let's talk about Quahog itself, because the town is almost a character in its own right. This fictional Rhode Island community is populated by an incredible cast of recurring characters who each bring their own flavor to the show's universe. There's Joe Swanson, the paralyzed police officer whose determination and positive attitude contrast sharply with his neighbor's various dysfunctions. Cleveland Brown, before he got his own spin-off, represented this calm, reasonable voice in the chaos of Quahog. His friendship with Peter, despite Peter's often thoughtless behavior, showed this theme that runs throughout the series about how genuine friendships can survive even the most ridiculous circumstances. Glenn Quagmire is probably the most controversial neighbor because he's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. His character serves as this extreme example of toxic masculinity taken to absurd lengths, but the show occasionally gives him moments of vulnerability that suggest there's more to him than just his predatory behavior. The local businesses in Quahog each have their own personalities too. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar where the guys hang out. It's this working-class sanctuary where they can escape their domestic responsibilities and bond over beer and television. Jerome, the bartender, represents this stable, wise presence who's seen everything and judges nothing. One of the most underappreciated aspects of Family Guy lore is how it handles social commentary. Yes, the show is often criticized for pushing boundaries, but if you look closely, there's actually a consistent moral framework underlying most episodes. The show frequently punishes characters for their bad behavior, even if those consequences don't carry over to future episodes. Peter's schemes usually backfire spectacularly, teaching him lessons he immediately forgets. Stewie's attempts at manipulation often result in him learning something about empathy or human connection. Brian's pretensions are regularly deflated by reality. The show has this way of exploring serious topics through absurd scenarios that somehow makes the underlying messages more palatable. The cutaway gags, which are probably the show's most recognizable feature, serve a purpose beyond just getting laughs. They provide breathing room in episodes, allow for pop culture commentary, and give the writers freedom to explore ideas that wouldn't fit into the main storyline. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've entered the broader cultural conversation. What's really impressive about Family Guy's longevity is how it's managed to stay relevant across multiple decades of changing cultural landscape. The show started in the late 90s, survived cancellation, came back stronger than ever, and continues to find new audiences while maintaining its core identity. That takes real skill from the writers, voice actors, and animators who bring this world to life. The voice acting, especially, deserves recognition because Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters while maintaining distinct personalities for each one. Peter's Rhode Island accent, Stewie's British sophistication, Brian's intellectual pretensions, roulette. Each voice tells you everything you need to know about the character before they even start talking. As we've journeyed through this animated universe tonight, what emerges is a picture of a show that's far more thoughtful and complex than its reputation might suggest. Family Guy works because beneath all the chaos and controversy, it's fundamentally about family. Messy, complicated, dysfunctional family, but family nonetheless. The Griffins may be terrible to each other most of the time, but when it really matters, they come together. Peter and Lois may have a dysfunctional marriage, but there are moments of genuine love and connection. The kids may be weird and damaged, but they're finding their way through adolescence and childhood as best they can. Maybe that's why Family Guy has endured for so long, and why we keep coming back to Quahog night after night. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, there's something comforting about a fictional family that's even more messed up than we are, but somehow keeps going anyway. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in Rhode Island, Peter Griffin is probably doing something incredibly stupid, Lois is wondering how her life got to this point, and Stewie's plotting world domination while secretly just wanting someone to read him a bedtime story. Sweet dreams, and thanks for joining me in the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy. What if I told you that underneath all the random cutaway gags and crude humor, Family Guy has been building one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden lore that connects everything from Stewie's time travel adventures to the cosmic horror lurking beneath Quahog's seemingly normal surface. Get comfortable, because this journey through the Griffin family's secret universe is going to be a wild ride that might just change how you see every episode forever. Let's start with something that seems innocent enough, but opens up an entire rabbit hole of implications. Have you ever noticed that Stewie Griffin isn't just a baby with advanced intelligence? He's actually a being that exists outside the normal flow of time itself. Throughout the series, we've seen him build time machines, travel to alternate dimensions, and even meet future versions of himself. But here's where it gets interesting. In several episodes, Stewie demonstrates knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes he seems to be aware that he's in a television show. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's a consistent pattern that suggests Stewie might be some kind of temporal entity that chose to inhabit the body of a baby for reasons we're only beginning to understand. Think about it. He's built multiple time machines from scratch using household items. He's created clones, developed advanced weaponry, and even constructed interdimensional portals. No normal baby, no matter how intelligent, could accomplish these things without some kind of supernatural assistance or inherent cosmic power. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider his relationship with Brian. Unlike other family members who seem to understand Stewie only sporadically, Brian consistently communicates with him on an adult level. But Brian isn't just any dog. He's a talking dog who drives cars, writes novels, and has existential crises about the nature of reality. The fact that these two characters can communicate perfectly suggests they might both be operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the family. Speaking of Brian, let's explore his own mysterious origins. He was found as a stray by the Griffin family, but his background remains largely unexplained. He drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and engages in romantic relationships with humans. In several episodes, we've seen him question his own nature and struggle with the absurdity of being a talking dog in a world where most animals don't speak. This existential awareness might be the key to understanding his true nature. There's a theory that Brian represents a bridge between the normal world and the supernatural elements that permeate Quahog. He's intelligent enough to recognize the strangeness around him, but trapped in a form that prevents him from fully participating in human society. His conversations with Stewie often touch on philosophical and scientific concepts that suggest both characters are aware of deeper truths about their reality. Now let's talk about Peter Griffin himself, because beneath his bumbling exterior lies something far more complex. Peter has survived explosions, falls from incredible heights, and injuries that should have killed him dozens of times over. He's also demonstrated superhuman strength in various episodes, lifting cars and fighting characters with obvious supernatural abilities. But more importantly, Peter seems to be a nexus point for the weird events that happen in Quahog. Everywhere Peter goes, reality seems to bend slightly. Characters break into musical numbers for no reason. People appear and disappear without explanation. The laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. It's as if Peter's presence weakens the barriers between the normal world and something much stranger. This could explain why the Griffin family attracts so many bizarre situations and supernatural encounters. Consider the episode where Peter gains psychic powers, or the times he's been visited by supernatural entities. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that suggests Peter might be unknowingly channeling some kind of cosmic energy. His simple-minded nature could be a protective mechanism that prevents him from fully comprehending his own power, because if Peter ever became truly aware of his abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lois Griffin presents her own mysteries. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife trying to keep her chaotic family together. But Lois has her own dark secrets and hidden depths. She comes from a wealthy family with connections that extend far beyond what we see on screen. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, isn't just rich. He's connected to military-industrial complexes and shadowy organizations that operate behind the scenes. Throughout the series, Lois has demonstrated skills and knowledge that suggest extensive training in areas most housewives would never encounter. She's fluent in multiple languages, skilled in combat, and has connections to criminal organizations. In several episodes, she's shown leading double lives that involve activities ranging from boxing to working with international intelligence agencies. These aren't random plot devices, but hints at a much larger story about who Lois really is and why she ended up with the Griffin family. There's also the question of how Lois manages to hold the family together despite the constant chaos. She seems to have an almost supernatural ability to adapt to whatever insane situation her family creates. Whether it's dealing with Stewie's death rays or Peter's latest scheme to destroy the neighborhood, Lois always finds a way to restore some semblance of normalcy. This suggests she might be operating with knowledge or abilities that go beyond what we see on the surface. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this strange mythology. It's supposedly a normal Rhode Island community, but the events that occur there on a regular basis defy all logic. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Its residents include everything from former Nazis to aliens to interdimensional beings. The mayor is a corrupt official who openly admits to criminal activities, yet somehow the town continues to function. What's really interesting is how quickly the residents of Quahog accept supernatural events. When a chicken fights Peter through half the town, destroying buildings and causing massive property damage, everyone just goes back to their normal lives afterward. When time travel events create paradoxes that should fundamentally alter reality, the town adapts without question. This suggests that Quahog exists in a state of flexible reality where the impossible becomes routine. The recurring locations in Quahog also hint at deeper mysteries. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar. It's a place where characters regularly receive prophetic dreams and encounter supernatural entities. Quahog Elementary School has been the site of numerous reality-bending events. Even the Griffin House itself seems to exist partially outside normal space and time, with rooms that appear and disappear and basement areas that extend far beyond what the exterior structures should allow. Let's dive deeper into the show's treatment of death and resurrection, because Family Guy has a very loose relationship with mortality that suggests something profound about the nature of its reality. Characters die regularly, sometimes multiple times in the same episode, only to return without explanation. Brian has died and been brought back to life. Kenny McCormick from South Park has appeared in Family Guy, bringing his own resurrection mythology with him. This casual treatment of death isn't just a comedy device. It suggests that the characters exist in a reality where death is temporary or where multiple versions of the same character can exist simultaneously. Stewie has encountered alternate versions of himself and his family members from different timelines and dimensions. These aren't dreams or imagination sequences, but actual encounters with other versions of reality. The implications of this go far beyond simple comedy. If characters can die and return, if alternate versions of themselves exist in parallel dimensions, then the entire show might be taking place across multiple realities simultaneously. Each episode could be showing us events from different timelines or dimensions where slightly different versions of the characters exist. This would explain the show's inconsistent continuity and the way characters sometimes seem to forget major events from previous episodes. They're not forgetting. They're simply different versions of themselves who never experienced those events. The show isn't ignoring its own history. It's showing us glimpses of an infinite multiverse where every possible variation of the Griffin family's story plays out simultaneously. The religious and mythological elements in Family Guy also contribute to this deeper lore. The show has featured appearances by God, Jesus, the devil, and various other religious figures. These aren't parody versions, but actual supernatural entities who interact with the characters and influence events in Quahog. This suggests that the show's reality operates under a cosmology where divine and infernal forces are real and active. More intriguingly, these supernatural entities often seem to have specific interest in the Griffin family. God has personally intervened in their lives multiple times. Death himself has appeared as a character and formed relationships with family members. This level of cosmic attention suggests that the Griffins aren't just random people, but individuals who play important roles in some larger supernatural conflict or cosmic plan. The show's frequent use of cutaway gags might also be more than just random humor. These sequences often show Peter or other characters in completely different time periods, locations, or situations. What if these aren't imaginary scenarios, but glimpses of other realities where versions of these characters actually exist? The cutaway structure could be the show's way of revealing the multiverse that underlies its narrative. This interpretation would mean that every absurd cutaway gag is actually a window into an alternate dimension. Peter as a knight in medieval times isn't just a joke, it's a glimpse of a reality where a version of Peter actually lived during that era. The seemingly random nature of these sequences could be showing us how the barriers between dimensions occasionally thin, allowing characters to perceive events from parallel worlds. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy takes on new significance in this context. His move to Virginia and subsequent return isn't just a narrative convenience, it's evidence of how characters can move between different versions of reality. The Cleveland show might have been showing us events from a dimension where Cleveland never moved back to Quahog, while his return to Family Guy represents a convergence of timelines. The relationship between Family Guy and other animated shows in the same universe adds another layer to this mythology. The Simpsons crossover episode wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a demonstration that these shows exist in connected realities. Characters can travel between Springfield and Quahog, because these locations exist in the same multiverse, just in different dimensional frequencies. As we dive deeper into the show's lore, we start to see patterns that suggest a hidden intelligence behind the chaos. The seemingly random events that plague the Griffin family might actually be tests or challenges designed by cosmic forces to determine their worthiness for some greater purpose. Stewie's advanced intelligence, Brian's existential awareness, Peter's reality-warping presence, and Lois's mysterious background could all be pieces of a larger puzzle. The show's self-aware humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall might be characters occasionally becoming conscious of their true nature as beings in a constructed reality. When characters acknowledge that they're in a television show, they might be experiencing moments of cosmic awareness where they perceive the true nature of their existence. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Family Guy's hidden lore. The show might be depicting the gradual awakening of its characters to their true nature as multidimensional beings trapped in a television narrative. Each season, the characters become slightly more aware of the absurdity of their situations and the arbitrary nature of the rules governing their reality. Stewie's evolution from would-be world conqueror to time-traveling adventurer represents his growing understanding of his cosmic nature. Brian's increasing cynicism and existential crises reflect his awareness that he's trapped between worlds. Peter's adventures become more outlandish because he's unconsciously pushing against the boundaries of his reality. Lois's hidden depths suggest she's always been aware of the truth, but has been protecting her family from it. The true horror and beauty of Family Guy's lore lies in this gradual revelation that nothing is as it seems. What appears to be random comedy is actually a complex meditation on the nature of reality, identity, and consciousness. The Griffin family's bizarre adventures are their unconscious attempts to break free from the limitations of their constructed world and discover their true nature as cosmic entities playing out an eternal story across infinite dimensions. So the next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that seem like throwaway gags. Notice how death has no permanent meaning, how reality bends around the characters, how they sometimes seem aware of forces beyond their comprehension. You're not just watching a comedy show. You're witnessing the gradual awakening of beings who are slowly discovering that they exist in a reality far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. This is the true lore of Family Guy. Hidden beneath layers of crude humor and random cutaways, a story about consciousness trying to understand itself across multiple realities and infinite possibilities. Sweet dreams. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through endless YouTube videos, desperately searching for something that will finally help your brain shut off and drift into peaceful sleep. But here's the thing. What if I told you that one of the most chaotic, irreverent animated shows on television actually contains some of the most intricate, soothing lore that's perfect for bedtime listening? Tonight, we're diving deep into the surprisingly complex world of Family Guy, exploring the hidden depths, character backstories, and interconnected mysteries that will gently carry you off to dreamland. You might be wondering how a show known for its cutaway gags and crude humor could possibly be relaxing. But trust me, when you peel back the layers of chaos and focus on the underlying mythology, Family Guy reveals itself to be a masterpiece of world building that's been quietly developing for over 2 decades. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that you've never experienced before. Let's start with the Griffin family home itself, that iconic house at 31 Spooner Street. This isn't just any ordinary suburban dwelling. There is a character in its own right, with a history that stretches back generations. The house has witnessed countless adventures, housed multiple families, and even survived being completely destroyed and rebuilt. There's something deeply comforting about the consistency of this space. The way the living room layout never changes, how the kitchen remains a constant gathering place for the family's most important moments. The basement of the Griffin house holds particular significance in the show's lore. It's not just where Peter keeps his exercise equipment that he never uses. It's been a fallout shelter, a laboratory, a secret hideout, and even a portal to other dimensions in various episodes. The basement represents the hidden depths beneath the surface chaos of the Griffin family life, much like how this very video represents the hidden depths beneath Family Guy's surface comedy. Speaking of Peter Griffin, let's explore the surprisingly complex psychology of this seemingly simple character. Peter isn't just a bumbling father figure. He's a man with deep-seated insecurities, childhood trauma, and an almost childlike wonder about the world around him. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, shaped his entire worldview. Growing up believing his father was dead, only to discover he was actually alive and working as a knight at medieval times, created a fundamental trust issue that manifests in Peter's often erratic behavior. Peter's various career changes throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they represent his constant search for identity and purpose. From his time as a toy factory worker, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief period as a country music star, to his role as a brewery owner, each job represents a different facet of Peter's personality trying to emerge. The fact that he always returns to the brewery suggests that, deep down, Peter understands that consistency and routine are what truly matter in life. The relationship between Peter and his wife Lois is built on a foundation that runs much deeper than surface-level attraction. Lois Pewterschmidt Griffin comes from incredible wealth and privilege, yet she chose to marry a blue-collar worker and embrace a middle-class lifestyle. This decision speaks to her character's core values. She prioritizes love, family, and authenticity over material comfort. Her occasional moments of frustration with Peter aren't signs of a failing marriage, but rather natural responses to the challenges of loving someone unconditionally. Lois's musical talents, her piano playing and singing abilities, represent her artistic soul that she's never fully abandoned despite becoming a full-time mother and wife. These moments when she plays piano in the living room are some of the show's most genuinely peaceful scenes, offering viewers a glimpse into the quieter, more contemplative side of the Griffin household. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of human development and potential. Meg, often the target of the family's jokes, is actually the most grounded and emotionally mature member of the household. Her struggles with popularity and self-acceptance mirror the universal teenage experience, but her resilience and ultimate self-worth make her a quietly heroic figure. The way she continues to care for her family despite their treatment of her speaks to an inner strength that's truly admirable. Chris Griffin embodies the awkward transition from childhood to adulthood, with all the confusion and wonder that entails. His artistic talents, his surprising moments of wisdom, and his generally kind nature suggest a bright future ahead. Despite his current social awkwardness, there's something deeply relatable about Chris's journey of self-discovery, his struggles with body image, and his earnest attempts to understand the adult world around him. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. Behind his megalomaniacal exterior lies a sophisticated intelligence grappling with existential questions that most adults never even consider. Stewie's time machine adventures aren't just science fiction comedy, they represent humanity's eternal desire to understand our place in the universe, to correct our mistakes, and to glimpse what lies ahead. The evolution of Stewie's character from would-be world conqueror to confused child genius to questioning young person represents one of television's most subtle and well-executed character developments. His relationship with Brian the dog serves as the emotional core of many episodes, showing how friendship can transcend species, age, and even sanity. Brian Griffin deserves special attention in any discussion of Family Guy lore. As the family dog who walks upright, speaks eloquently, and pursues intellectual interests, Brian represents the aspirational aspects of human nature. His struggles with alcoholism, his romantic failures, and his literary ambitions make him perhaps the most human character on the show, despite being a dog. Brian's backstory, including his time as a stray in Austin, Texas, and his eventual adoption by the Griffin family, speaks to themes of belonging and found family that resonate deeply with viewers. His college education, his liberal political views, and his artistic pretensions might make him seem pretentious, but they also represent the very human desire for self-improvement and intellectual growth. The recurring characters of Quahog create a rich tapestry of small-town life that feels both familiar and fantastical. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffin's neighbor, might seem like a one-dimensional character focused on his pilot career and romantic pursuits. But deeper examination reveals a man grappling with loneliness and searching for genuine connection. His antagonistic relationship with Brian stems from philosophical differences that reflect real-world political and social divisions. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter represents the kind of loyal, enduring male friendship that many viewers find deeply comforting. Despite moving away to star in his own show and eventually returning, Cleveland's bond with Peter remains unchanged, speaking to the timeless nature of true friendship. Their shared history, from high school through adulthood, creates a sense of continuity and stability in an otherwise chaotic world. Joe Swanson's story as a disabled police officer adds layers of representation and resilience to the show's universe. His determination to maintain his career and active lifestyle despite his paralysis, combined with his role as a devoted husband and father, makes him an inspiring figure. The friendship between Joe, Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland represents different aspects of masculinity and how men can support each other through life's challenges. The town of Quahog itself has a rich history that's been revealed gradually throughout the series. From its founding by seemingly ordinary settlers to its hidden connections to major historical events, Quahog represents the idea that every small town has secrets and stories worth telling. The various businesses, from the Drunken Clam Bar to the Quahog Mini Mart, create a sense of place that feels lived in and authentic. The Drunken Clam, in particular, serves as a sanctuary for the male characters, a place where they can escape the responsibilities and pressures of adult life. The dim lighting, the familiar faces, and the comfortable routine of sharing drinks and conversation create an atmosphere that many viewers find deeply relaxing and nostalgic. Family Guy's approach to continuity is uniquely comforting for late-night viewing. While the show often resets situations and ignores consequences for comedic purposes, certain elements remain constant. Entity, the family's love for each other, their shared experiences, and the fundamental dynamics that define their relationships. This selective continuity creates a dreamlike quality where anything can happen, but the core emotional truths remain unchanged. The show's frequent flashbacks and cutaway gags, while often dismissed as random humor, actually serve to expand the universe's mythology. Each glimpse into a character's past, each reference to historical events, and each bizarre scenario adds another layer to the show's complex tapestry. These moments create a sense that the characters have rich, full lives beyond what we see in the main episodes. The musical elements of Family Guy deserve special recognition for their soothing qualities. From Lois's piano performances to the elaborate musical numbers that occasionally take over entire episodes, music serves as a unifying force in the Griffin household. These musical moments often reveal character, emotions, and relationships in ways that dialogue alone cannot, creating some of the series' most genuinely touching scenes. The show's treatment of holidays and traditions provides a comforting structure that mirrors real family life. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and birthday celebrations create anchor points throughout the series, giving viewers familiar touchstones that feel like returning home. The way the Griffin family celebrates these occasions, with all their chaos and love, reflects the messy reality of actual family gatherings. Peter's various schemes and adventures, while often absurd, follow certain patterns that create a sense of predictability within unpredictability. His enthusiasm for new projects, his inevitable complications, and his family's support, despite their exasperation, create a comfortable rhythm that's perfect for relaxation. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that no matter how crazy Peter's latest idea gets, everything will work out in the end. The relationship between the Griffin family and their extended family members adds another layer of complexity to the show's lore. Lois's wealthy parents, the Pewterschmidts, represent old money and social expectations, while Peter's working-class background creates natural tensions that many viewers can relate to. These family dynamics play out over multiple episodes and seasons, creating long-term storylines that reward dedicated viewers. The show's occasional ventures into science fiction and fantasy elements expand the universe beyond the boundaries of realistic suburban life. Time travel episodes, alternate dimension stories, and encounters with supernatural beings suggest that the Family Guy universe operates on different rules than our own, where anything is possible, and wonder lurks around every corner. As we wind down our journey through Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth reflecting on what makes this chaotic comedy so unexpectedly soothing when viewed through the lens of lore and continuity. Perhaps it's the underlying message that families, despite their flaws and conflicts, ultimately stick together. Maybe it's the comfort of familiar characters and settings that feel like old friends. Or possibly it's the show's ability to find humor and humanity in even the most absurd situations. The Griffin family, for all their dysfunction and chaos, represents something fundamentally hopeful about human nature. They make mistakes, they hurt each other's feelings, they get into ridiculous situations, but they always come back together. They forgive, they support each other, and they continue to grow and change as individuals while maintaining their core family bond. So as you close your eyes tonight, let your mind wander through the streets of Quahog, past the familiar houses and landmarks, into the warm glow of 31 Spooner Street, where a family gathers each evening, sharing meals, stories, and love, despite all their imperfections. In that comfortable, chaotic, deeply human space, perhaps you'll find the peace and rest you've been searching for. Sweet dreams. And remember, no matter how crazy life gets, there's always home, there's always family, and there's always tomorrow to try again. The lore of Family Guy reminds us that even in the most unlikely places, we can find stories worth telling, characters worth loving, and moments worth treasuring. Rest well, knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, the Griffin family continues their eternal dance of chaos and love, providing comfort to viewers around the world who find solace in their familiar dysfunction and unwavering devotion to each other. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Picture this. It's 2 in the morning. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters and crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledge the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues, help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy, with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland show. During Season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog, who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics, requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off into dreamland. But instead of counting sheep, what if I told you some absolutely wild facts about one of television's most chaotic families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes disturbing world of Family Guy, with facts so strange, they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that's perfect for your bedtime routine. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just need something to occupy your mind as you wind down, these Family Guy facts will give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's creation. Family Guy almost never made it to air in the first place. Seth MacFarlane created the pilot when he was just 24 years old, working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that it's almost unrecognizable. Brian wasn't even supposed to be the sophisticated martini-drinking intellectual we know and love. Originally, he was just going to be a regular dog who occasionally spoke. But McFarlane decided that having a talking dog who acted completely normal would be funnier than having one who was still essentially just a pet. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might keep you thinking as you fall asleep. Brian Griffin is technically immortal in some episodes, but ages normally in others. The show has never been consistent about whether Brian ages like a regular dog or if he's somehow exempt from typical canine lifespans. In some episodes, he's mentioned to be around 7 years old in dog years, which would make him middle-aged. But in others, he references events from decades ago, as if he experienced them personally. This inconsistency is just one of many things that make Family Guy's continuity so fascinatingly chaotic. Now, let's talk about Stewie Griffin, the baby genius with questionable intentions. Did you know that Stewie's sexuality has been a subject of debate not just among fans but actually within the show's writing room? Seth MacFarlane has stated in interviews that Stewie is meant to be gay, but the character's sexuality has been portrayed inconsistently throughout the series. In early episodes, Stewie had crushes on various female characters, but later seasons have shown him with clear attractions to male characters. The writers have deliberately kept this ambiguous, which adds another layer to Stewie's already complex character. Here's something that might give you pleasant dreams. The voice actors for Family Guy are incredibly talented beyond just their work on the show. Seth MacFarlane, who voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, is also an accomplished singer who has released several jazz albums. His singing voice is so good that he's performed with major orchestras and has even done tribute concerts to classic crooners like Frank Sinatra. Imagine Peter Griffin serenading you to sleep with smooth jazz standards. Let's dive into some facts about the show's most controversial character, Peter Griffin himself. Peter's weight has been a running gag throughout the series, but did you know that his exact weight has been mentioned multiple times with wildly different numbers? In some episodes, he's said to weigh around 270 pounds, while in others, the number jumps to over 300. The inconsistency is intentional, reflecting how the show treats Peter's physical characteristics as fluid depending on what's funniest for any given episode. Peter's job history is another source of endless entertainment and confusion. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, various other random jobs, and has even been unemployed for extended periods. But here's what's interesting. The show never explains how the Griffin family maintains their lifestyle during Peter's unemployed periods. They live in a decent house in what appears to be a middle-class neighborhood, yet Peter's employment status seems to have no impact on their standard of living. It's one of those cartoon logic elements that you just have to accept. Speaking of the Griffin house, have you ever noticed that the layout seems to change between episodes? Sometimes there are rooms that appear out of nowhere, and other times, familiar rooms seem to vanish. The basement, in particular, seems to change size and purpose depending on the episode's needs. In some episodes, it's a small storage space, while in others, it's large enough to hold elaborate contraptions or even entire gatherings. This kind of flexible architecture is common in animated shows, but Family Guy takes it to particularly absurd lengths. Let's talk about Meg Griffin, the family's perpetual punching bag. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Meg was originally supposed to be the most normal character in the family, serving as the audience's point of view into this chaotic household. But as the show evolved, the writers found it funnier to make her the target of everyone's abuse. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by the time it was fully established, Meg had transformed from a relatable teenager into a character whose suffering was played for laughs. The voice of Meg has also changed throughout the series. Originally voiced by Lacey Chabert, the role was taken over by Mila Kunis starting in Season 2. The transition was so seamless that many viewers didn't even notice the change. Kunis was actually still a teenager when she started voicing Meg, making her closer in age to the character than most voice actors are to their animated counterparts. Here's a soothing fact about the show's animation style. Family Guy uses a technique called cutaway gags that allows for infinite creative possibilities. These brief segments, usually introduced by phrases like, "This is worse than the time," allow the animators to create completely different scenarios, time periods, and art styles within a single episode. Some of these cutaways reference obscure pop culture moments, while others create entirely fictional scenarios. The animators have said that creating these cutaways is one of the most enjoyable parts of working on the show because there are virtually no limitations on what they can create. Let's discuss some facts about Quahog, the fictional Rhode Island town where the Griffins live. The town's name is actually a type of clam, which is fitting given Rhode Island's coastal location. But here's what's interesting. The geography of Quahog seems to change depending on the episode's needs. Sometimes it's portrayed as a small town where everyone knows each other, while other times it seems large enough to support multiple shopping districts, airports, and major venues. The town has everything from a small town feel to big city amenities, depending on what the plot requires. The Drunken Clam, the bar where Peter and his friends hang out, is based on real bars that McFarlane frequented during his college years. The atmosphere and the type of conversations that happen there are drawn from McFarlane's actual experiences, which explains why the dialogue often feels so authentic despite the absurd situations. Here's something that might help you drift off. The show's theme song is intentionally designed to be catchy and memorable, but it's also shorter than most television theme songs. This was a deliberate choice to maximize the amount of time available for actual content in each episode. The brevity of the theme song allows for more jokes and story development, which is part of why Family Guy episodes often feel packed with content. Let's talk about some of the show's recurring characters and their origins. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffins' oversexed neighbor, was originally conceived as a minor character who would appear occasionally, but the writers found his character so entertaining that he became a regular part of the cast. His distinctive laugh and catchphrase, "giggity," weren't in the original character design, but developed naturally as the voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, experimented with the character's vocal patterns. Cleveland Brown, Peter's friend who eventually got his own spin-off show, was originally going to be a very different character. The writers initially conceived him as being more similar to Peter in personality, but they decided it would be funnier to make him the calm, rational member of the group. This decision led to Cleveland becoming the voice of reason among Peter's friends, often serving as a counterbalance to their more outrageous behavior. Joe Swanson, the paraplegic police officer, was created to add diversity to the show's cast, but the writers were careful to make his disability just one aspect of his character rather than his defining trait. In many episodes, Joe is the most competent and heroic character, often solving problems that the other characters can't handle. His wheelchair is rarely portrayed as a limitation, and he's often shown doing things that would be impossible for anyone, disabled or not. Here's a relaxing fact about the show's production schedule. Family Guy episodes are typically produced months in advance, which allows the animators and voice actors to take their time perfecting each episode. Unlike live-action shows that have to rush to meet weekly deadlines, animated shows like Family Guy can spend weeks on individual scenes, ensuring that every joke lands and every visual gag is perfectly timed. The show's writer's room operates on a collaborative system where anyone can contribute ideas, regardless of their official role on the show. This has led to some of the show's most memorable moments coming from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person responsible for continuity might suggest a joke that becomes central to an episode, or a voice actor might improvise a line that becomes a recurring catchphrase. Let's discuss some facts about the show's cultural impact that might give you something peaceful to think about as you fall asleep. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces the challenge of adapting American cultural references for international audiences. Some jokes that work perfectly in English become completely different jokes in other languages, while others are replaced entirely with references that local audiences will understand. The show's influence on internet culture has been enormous. Many of Family Guy's cutaway gags and memorable quotes have become memes that spread far beyond the show's original audience. The phrase, "oh no," in Peter's distinctive voice, for example, became a popular reaction GIF used in contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. Here's something interesting about the show's approach to celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that cast celebrities to voice characters similar to themselves, Family Guy often has famous people voice characters that are completely different from their real personalities. This approach has led to some surprising and entertaining performances that showcase different sides of well-known actors and musicians. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which actually makes it more relaxing to watch in some ways. You don't need to remember every detail from previous episodes to understand what's happening, because the show often contradicts its own established facts for the sake of a good joke. This means you can watch episodes in any order and still enjoy them fully, which is perfect for casual viewing or when you're trying to wind down. Let's talk about some facts about the show's music and sound design. Family Guy employs a full orchestra for many of its musical numbers, which is unusual for an animated television series. This attention to musical detail means that even throwaway songs and cutaway gags are often surprisingly well-produced and catchy. The show's composers have backgrounds in both television and theatrical music, which explains why many of the musical segments feel like they could work on stage. The sound effects in Family Guy are often created in unusual ways. The iconic sound of Peter falling down and hurting himself, which happens in almost every episode, is actually a combination of several different sounds layered together. The voice actors often provide their own sound effects during recording sessions, which gives the show a more organic feel than if all the sounds were added in post-production. Here's a fact that might help you smile as you drift off. The show's animators often hide small details in backgrounds that only the most observant viewers will notice. These Easter eggs can be anything from references to other shows, inside jokes among the production staff, or even tiny animations that have nothing to do with the main story. Finding these hidden details has become a hobby for some fans, who watch episodes multiple times just to catch things they missed. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the characters never seem to get older, the show acknowledges the passage of time in other ways. Technology updates, cultural references change, and real-world events are incorporated into episodes. This creates a strange temporal bubble where the characters exist in a perpetual present that somehow includes decades of cultural history. Let's discuss some production facts that showcase the incredible amount of work that goes into each episode. A single episode of Family Guy requires thousands of individual drawings, even though much of the animation is now done digitally. Each character expression, each background element, and each special effect needs to be designed and animated individually. The attention to detail is remarkable when you consider how quickly episodes need to be produced. The voice recording process is also more complex than you might expect. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, he rarely records them in conversation with each other during the same session. Instead, each character's lines are recorded separately, and the conversations are constructed in post-production. This means that MacFarlane has to imagine how his different characters would interact with each other and adjust his performance accordingly. Here's something soothing to consider. Despite all the chaos and controversy surrounding Family Guy, the show has created jobs for hundreds of people over its many seasons. Animators, voice actors, writers, musicians, sound engineers, and countless other professionals have built careers working on this show. In a way, all of this absurd humor has created a small community of creative people who work together to bring these ridiculous stories to life. The show's international success has also led to cultural exchange in unexpected ways. American animators have learned techniques from international studios, while animators from other countries have brought their own cultural perspectives to American television. This cross-pollination of ideas has enriched the medium of animation as a whole. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, let's consider something that might give you pleasant dreams. The show's enduring popularity suggests that there's something universally appealing about stories of dysfunctional families who, despite all their problems, somehow stick together. Even though the Griffin family is exaggerated to absurd proportions, there's something recognizable about their dynamics that resonates with audiences around the world. The show's ability to find humor in everyday situations, even when those situations are taken to impossible extremes, reflects a fundamentally optimistic view of life. No matter how bad things get, there's always something to laugh about. This perspective can be oddly comforting when you're trying to wind down from your own day's challenges. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you can think about this wild, wonderful, and completely unpredictable animated world where anything can happen, where the impossible is routine, and where laughter is always just around the corner. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a Quahog evening, minus all the explosions and chaos, of course. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who's just discovered these bizarre facts, I hope this journey through Family Guy's strange universe has given you something entertaining to think about as you fall asleep. Remember, in the world of animation, anything is possible, and tomorrow is just another opportunity for new adventures and unexpected laughs.